So good morning. My name's Anna O'Brien. I'm a psychotherapist living in Brisbane, Australia. And my particular interests are in trauma and eating disorders. And today I'm going to be interviewing Gary Van Warmerdam, spiritual teacher. And Gary was my personal teacher, as well as I was his coaching client for a number of years doing this self-mastery work. And I'm particularly excited to be here today interviewing Gary because I think his teachings and practices are profound, and they've certainly had a profound effect on my life in terms of overcoming childhood trauma and getting to live a happy and fulfilled life today. So I'm really excited to be here today. So I'm going to introduce Gary Van Warmerdam as a spiritual teacher. He's also the author of Mindworks, a practical guide for changing thoughts, beliefs, and emotional reactions. He's the creator of Pathway to Happiness and the Self-Mastery courses. He's the host of Awareness and Consciousness podcast and founder of the Self-Mastery community. So nice to have you here today, Gary.
Thank you, Anna. Beautiful to be here. Great to see
Lovely.
you always.
Lovely, lovely. Nice to see you
And
too.
you introduced me as a spiritual teacher. Okay.
Yes, yes. And we'll talk about that
We'll
in
talk
our
about that.
interviews as we go through. So we're going to be conducting a series of interviews where we'll get to know more about you and your personal journey with spiritual growth and transformation. We'll be talking about the intricate balance between the practical exercises that you teach and spirituality. We'll discuss the paradoxical nature of many of your teachings and practices. I'm hoping you're going to share your inspiration and insights into the lessons in the self-mastery courses. And
Anywhere you want to go.
Lovely.
So lead me to the question, and I will work to help clarify and provide something useful and insightful.
Fantastic. We're also going to talk about your power journeys and retreats and the part they play in this work and also personally for you. And I'm hoping to find out what piques your interest and what's next for you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking an interest. Thanks for taking an interest and giving me a heads up that you want more of the personal stuff in my life, and because I don't usually share that. And I was thinking about that because you asked to do this, and yeah, there's a couple things that we're breaking some habits of mine by going here, I think. And you know, I come from my teacher Miguel Ruiz, and he was certain very strong principles and practices, although a lot of freedom and all that. But he, you don't. One of the things is you don't gossip about yourself. You know, you don't share unnecessary information about yourself. And I think I hung on to that somewhat because I'm also the kind of person who's like shy about opening up, vulnerability, just putting myself out there, and more the personality to kind of sit back and go observe from the background, kind of go, what's going on here? And figuring out what's happening and not knowing where I fit into things. And so, yeah. And the other thing is I try to make the work about what I do about, I'm not the topic. I'm not the subject you should be learning about. Learn about yourself, make the transformations in yourself you want to make, you know, and to me, that's what's important. So,
Yeah.
So we'll break those rules today in these interviews.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, I've known you for a number of years now, as I said before, as a student and as a coaching client. And I also feel like I know you personally. And I think some of that personal information and even the background story behind what you do and why you do it is really important information. And it does help to fill in some of the gaps as we're traveling along this journey, and just feeling close and connected to someone who's guiding you and feeling like you have access to them, that they're not so elusive, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And, as I said, we've sat down, we've shared dinner together, we've chatted together, and I even still felt there was questions that I had and little gaps of information that I was curious about. And yeah, it's not about gossiping about you. We're not going to ask you what you do on weekends or personal information like that. But
Kayaking on the river this weekend.
yeah,
So
beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful.
yeah, yeah. So
Um,
ask whatever you like.
but some of that information about your journey a little bit more closely, I think, um, helps us to relate ourselves as we go through this journey, helps to understand the complexity and the difficulty sometimes, some of the pitfalls that you experience. And yeah, I think that's really helpful information. Terrific.
Absolutely. You are wise and correct, as you often are. So yeah, here I am.
Lovely. So let's get started.
Okay.
So can you describe for me the key moment or key moments where you realized that you needed to take a different path to what you were taking? So really, what was that starting point for you?
27 years old. So just about 30 years ago. 31 years ago, something like that. I left a career in the Navy. I just left a relationship that was uh, emotionally and physically abusive. My
Mm,
partner was all of 120 pounds. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was like, times she would haul up and hit me, or I'd end up with scratches on my face and neck. And it was like making excuses about, oh, we have to prepare and have a same story about why that is, if somebody asks. And I was all going along with it.
yeah.
And when when it got to the point where she wanted to hit me, but I was going to parry the blow, it was not going to, because I'm 6'3". So nearly twice her size. This was, I wasn't surprised anymore, and it was gonna show up. So I was gonna parry the blow. I wasn't gonna get hurt. And she got even madder because she could see I was gonna parry the blow and just subdue the situation. So she stepped over and she got a fire poker. She's walking at me with a fire poker. And I'm having this, am I dreaming? Is this really happening kind of moment? Well, on the off chance that it is, before I evaluate too long, let me grab that thing.
Mhm.
Um, and so then I was like, I don't know what's going on here. I had filled my head, and she'd done a very persuasive job convincing that a lot of this was all because of me. I was the reason why she was reacting, and the reason why she was angry, the reason that she was behaving the way she was. So I was like, okay, after that, I was like, even if this is me, I'm not staying here to figure it out. And so packed my things, left. I'm driving down the road. I'm a few hours down the road. And up until that point, I was just like, just pack the car, go, pack the car, go. I was like, just stay focused, because I had talked myself into staying multiple times. I allowed her to talk me into staying multiple times, just like an abusive relationship. But I didn't realize that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so now I'm a few hours down the road, and the chatter in my head is now going, well, yeah, Gary, you did leave. This is the very thing she was afraid of. This is what she said made her so volatile. This is
Mhm.
what triggered her. Gary, you're doing the very thing that she said you would do. Gary, she's right. You are leaving her. You're abandoning her. Look at what you're doing, right? So the narration in my head starts. But I had this drive from the early morning. Gary, don't think, just get in the car and drive. Don't think, get in the car and drive. Because thinking became a problem. I would go back. And now I had this but now it was like, this is where it's somebody picking up a fire poker, walking towards me level. And so I had that image. And so now I had this conflict in my mind. Gary, you're wrong. You should just go back and apologize and hope that she will take you back because nobody else will.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of sense of self-worth in that story. And the other now new voice going, don't think, just keep driving. Don't listen to that part of your voice in your head. Don't listen to it, keep driving. And so I kept driving. And then there was a bit of a noticing that this voice that was telling me I was wrong, I was a problem. Blaming myself. Now I had this other voice like, yeah, but she's the one that brought the fire poker to the scene.
Mm.
Right? And it was like, wait a minute, I'm blaming myself for what she did. Holy smokes, this is what an abused person does in an abusive relationship.
Absolutely.
I was living in that narrative story. This is who I was. I'm at fault. They're doing this because of me. All this kind of abdication of power. This is lesson number 2
Yes.
in my self-mastery course, right?
Yeah.
And I watched that part of my mind that was trying to talk me into thinking, it's my fault. She was right. I should go back and apologize. And she should say, I was watching that part of my mind. I'm like, no. But I saw that it was still there. I was like, I can't trust it. And so I had this moment of, I can't trust my own mind. It's telling me all these things that I know. But now this other part of mine that was afraid of the fire poker scene again was like, no, don't listen to it. And so I had this internal conflict that, thank God, it was a new voice on my side for my own defense and survival, or whatever it was. And I was like, but now my mind is a problem.
Mm.
It's inviting me to make very bad decisions and telling me I shouldn't, tell me I'm wrong, tell me it's my fault, when it was like, you know, there's got to be a whole other things to this. Okay, so that was the big wake up. And to her, I am very grateful.
Mm. Yes. Yeah. And I think a lot of what you've just described there really resonates with me and probably resonates with a lot of people. You know, first, what stands out to me is where we get to that point where we know we don't know. We know we don't know the answer. We know that what we've been doing is not something that we can keep doing. We can become very aware of that. And I think that's a really humbling point where we can just say, I do not know. I do not know what's next. I need some help and guidance here.
And what our mind gives us, it only gives us what we know, what it's decide and believes inside our bubble. It only gives its feedback of the bubble it's created for us. It's in the world. And so it doesn't give us anything new, different, contradiction to it, anything that would change it. So, so yeah, we have to get outside our own bubble. That woke me up from the bubble. I didn't know what to do, but I had this whole new awareness of, like, because I was an engineer, naval officer, thought I was pretty smart. My mind was this great tool, you know, and now I can't trust it. It's giving me it's making very bad decisions for me. What do you do about that? Like, my mind is inviting me and pushing me to make a bad choice against my own well-being. What do you do about that?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, we see in abusive relationships, and it's almost always there with trauma, is I don't believe myself. You know, your ex-partner was giving you a narrative.
I was believing her narrative about me instead of any narrative I had about myself. Yes. What narrative do I see as, and am I allowing them to invalidate it? Yes. Yeah, okay. So
Yeah, and I see those two things, the I do not know and the realization that I don't even believe myself, or I can't believe myself, or, noticing those conflicting stories inside. I should go back to her. No one else wants me.
which I had identified with, agreed with, and so it became my story. It was a story
Yeah.
she gave me, but when I agreed with it multiple times and in different ways in the past, it became my story. So now I was believing my story that I accepted that she gave me. So it was like I was believing in my own narrative, but it was the one she gave me. So it gets tricky. Like I'm believing myself because it's now my narrative, but
Yes.
it wasn't when I started.
And then you had that other story coming up that you can actually leave this.
Yeah. And that's been a kind of a theme. It's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know how to solve this, but I'm not staying here.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't have the whole thing figured out yet. I don't have to figure out how to make this whole relationship better. I don't know what's hers and what's mine. Didn't have any of this understanding of I'd adopted her narrative about me. I didn't have any of that, but it was like, here's the part I'm not doing. I'm not staying in this. I was like, I don't have to have it all figured out. I'm going to make this one move and then I'll figure out the next thing.
Yeah.
So then there was a couple pieces that moved me along. So this I was living on the East Coast at the time. And then so I had a long drive cross country. I stopped and visit a few friends along the way, and I got great nuggets and pieces from it. And one of them was this wonderful woman who was his husband was an alcoholic, and they were in the recovery. She was going to Al-Anon because of this 25-year marriage. She'd kind of said, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not making excuses to the children. And I was just amazed at how honest she was.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her that, and she said, well, thank you. And it came down to two things. It's like, I couldn't do the lies anymore. Okay. It was just so many lies, too painful. And I was like, I'm not going to do the lies. Two things she'd figured out. And the second was, what's my half? She's like, my husband is alcoholic. I don't know what his half is, but what did I do to put myself in this situation? Why did I stay? Right. So I thought those were two interesting things. So after a few days there, I'm back on the road and I'm driving through wheat fields, really boring landscape. And I'm ranting in my head about the relationship, about my job that I was tired and exhausted from, that I just left the Navy. I was like, I'm unhappy in my career and I left. It was like just tired and burned out. I was unhappy in relationship, and it's like that isn't working. It's like, here's two areas that you should probably hope to find some fulfillment. And I'm like,
Mm.
crashed both, unhappy in both. And I'm ranting in my mind with this narrative criticism of both.
Yeah.
And while I'm there, this woman's things like, Gary, what's your half? What are you
Yeah.
responsible for in this? Okay. And this is abdication of power. Like, take some responsibility, quit the blaming. I wasn't the one that picked up the fire poker, but I chose to be in that relationship and chose to stay every day. Somewhere I chose to go join the Navy, be an engineer, and be in a workaholic environment. Okay. And, you know, and again, I had this split mind. One part is ranting about other things outside of me. And this other voice comes as like, Gary, what's the truth of your half? And I could it was uncomfortable. It was like,
Mm.
it felt this superiority, this, injustice, and I could be this moral authority criticizing these other people. So it felt good, but underneath I was complaining, that feels terrible. But when I looked and said, Gary, what's your half? What's your role in living and choosing and creating this for yourself? I could feel it turned into something else. And it was, I remember the feeling, it was like I was taking responsibility and it was uncomfortable. I just wanted to push it away. It was like, what have I done with my life? It was like, I've made garbage out of it. I'm miserable. I'm unhappy. And I wanted to go back to the rant because I could feel some superiority over the other people by criticizing them.
Yeah.
It's like this sweet pain in it.
Yeah.
And so but I'm like, this woman's voice, she's like, don't do the lies anymore.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm having this debate, and over a course of hours, I come back to, Gary, don't do the lies anymore. Quit your rant. What's your half? And eventually settled in on it. And I began to go, I chose to be there. This is what my choices were. I could have left any day out of that relationship. I still chose to stay longer. I agreed with her convincing me with all these things.
Yeah.
I agreed to what she said. That was my power to put in her narrative and agree to have that narrative about me. I was taking responsibility. I was like, it felt like I had eaten a leather softball. And I was like, just had this heavy, sinking feeling of, this is what I've done. And I sat with that for a while. And my mind wanted to push it away and go back to blame. I'm like, no, don't do the lies, don't do the stories. This is what I've done. It was tempting. It's like the mind wants to go to something else. So I sat with that across wheat fields and cornfields. And after a while, and I don't know how many hours, or maybe the next day, there was like, if I created this by my agreements with these people, with myself, with these stories and decisions, and I've gotten myself into a miserable unhappiness. And I've done it unconsciously. That's pretty damn powerful. What could I do with that power?
Yeah.
If I consciously used it to be happy. Because I was like, I've been creating misery for myself through all these agreements and behaviors and choices of who to be with and what narratives to believe. And I'm like, and I was like, I could use the same power to create happiness and joy in my life. And I decided in that moment, this was the turning point. I was like, I'm going to use all that power that I've been unconsciously using into these other stories and blaming and what have you, and criticism and agreeing to other people's narratives. I'm going to use it and I want to be happy no matter what. And I'm going to figure out what is in this decision-making process in here that is taking me down these old roads, and I'm going to change it.
Yeah.
And I felt that like every intense, I wanted it more than I wanted anything else.
Yeah. Can I just pull a few things out there that you said that really,
Please.
really resonated with me, and I'm imagining would resonate with a lot of people. First, that getting stuck with, it shouldn't be like this. I've been doing all the right things. I've been, you went to uni, you got an engineering degree, you went to the Navy, you're having a relationship, you're showing up. It shouldn't be this way. It's like that fight against reality. I did my part. I should be getting the outcome that I want. It shouldn't be like this. It should not be this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then coming to the honest realization that this is how it is. And that, I've experienced that myself. It is so painful to stepping out of that cosmic, the cosmic mistake, it should not be this way, into this is actually just how it is.
And I think in that narrative, in the way I thought about myself, I think I'm a good person. Good things should happen to me, right? I'm
Yes.
serving my country. I think I'm trying to help my partner and whatever she's going through. Take as much responsibility for it and try to make as many changes as possible so she's happier. It's like, I think I'm being a good guy. But what is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? It's like, I don't know what mess I'm also unintentionally agreeing to with all my good intentions.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not because I have good intention doesn't mean I'm making good decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you start to say, what's my half? It's not coming from that blaming yourself, blaming them, the pity party, all of that. It's not coming from that. It's just having that realistic look at what's going on here. What am I doing to contribute to this? What am I agreeing to? What decisions am I making? What actions am I taking?
And
Just an
there's
honest look at it.
yeah, a real honest assessment. And there's a real clear line between, wow, this is my life I created, and this is my experience that I stepped in and was my creation that I'm miserable in.
Mhm.
And there's a very clear line, like where you jump into a narrative of criticism, self-criticism, or victimization about it. Gary, you were such an idiot. What the hell were you thinking? That's so stupid. You should know better. All of that about the decision, garbage.
Mm.
Okay. You need to do the first part, which is kind of this, just own it. I needed to.
Yes.
But the second part that the mind, the judgmental, complaining, criticizing, victim type archetype characters our mind that want to do, you have to say, completely not needed.
Yeah.
It's completely
Not
not
helpful
needed. Just
information.
clouds it up and says, no, we don't need to do that. And
Mm.
so by some grace, I was able to stay out of that kind of self-judgment and step out of the judgments of other people and just own it.
Yeah.
So, and I
Yeah.
think I think like wanting the truth was part of that. It's like, okay, what's the truth? And none of that narratives of criticism, victimization is like about it. It's like none of that's the truth.
Mm. Yeah. So a question that I've always been interested in, and a lot of people, other people have indicated that they're interested in, is how did you come across Don Miguel Ruiz's teachings, and why did they resonate with you? Why did you say yes to that?
So I'm driving cross country. I now see I have a mind I can't trust. I create misery in my life. I don't know how to be happy, which you think a 5-year-old knows how to be happy.
Mm.
But I, with all my education, supposed smarts, don't know how to do it. And I'm like, and this is like, I now want to be happy more than anything else. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do a job, don't know how to do a relationship. I'm not a smart man. I'm like, this should have figured this out a long time ago. No, it's not been a priority in school and my socialization, and
Yeah,
right?
and
If you think
society
about
doesn't
it,
teach us that.
no, our training is it, you go and you get a good job and career in school, and you make money and you have a good relationship, and then happiness comes. And
Yes.
I reversed it. I was like, no, those are not the number one priority now. My emotional state and happiness is, and then I want to build career and anything else, has to support that.
Yeah.
Instead of expect it to come as like some, you know,
Prize.
after the fact prize
Yes.
for being, doing those things well. So anyways, so there I am, I'm driving cross country, and I'm like, now I know I have to fix the decision-making process in this mind. I make a couple more stops. I stop off and visit a friend in Nevada who'd been studying with Miguel for a couple years.
Mhm.
She'd already been to probably a couple Mexican journeys with him. She'd had a similar life crisis when she then said, I've got to totally rechange my values and priorities in life. And I was doing that with his guidance. And then she left a flyer out on her desk, on the table, staying there. He was given a workshop, and I think it was called Seduction, or the Art of Seduction.
Mhm.
You know, it's all about being seduced by illusions, is what it turned out to be. But a catchy title to his talk he was giving in Sacramento, which is basically just almost I could go through Sacramento on the way home. So I
Okay.
stayed an extra day, or went a day early, stopped in Sacramento. He was giving a talk on a Thursday evening about this time of year 30 years ago, in April. And I listened to him give a talk on seduction. And that was my first meeting with Miguel.
Mm.
About 2 weeks after I made this commitment to change my mind and be happy no matter what.
Mm. It's interesting, isn't it, when we make that decision? And, I've got a similar moment in life where I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
and you showed up for me. Um, you had that same commitment, that same intention. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And
yeah,
Miguel's fly shows up.
yeah. And I didn't know who he was, didn't know what he looked like, didn't know that he would be of any value. I just said, well, I said, will this be of any help? She said, for what you're going through right now, I think it'd be really good. Okay. So, nudged me along. Later, we laughed that she kind of just totally baited me. So I was like, that flyer was there
Flies
on
in
the
every
table for
room.
me to find,
Yeah.
you know, which I thank her again, eternally for that. So yeah, and I sat in the back, as I'll be the observer of, someone in the back off to the side, and
Mhm.
in my mind had narratives of criticizing that he was late, to start.
Mhm. Yeah.
And why are all these people fussing over him? And because I just come from the military, and I'm looking at the time, and I'm like, well, he's not being respectful of everybody's time here. And so my narrator judge goes, and
Yeah.
so
And so what did resonate? Why did you keep coming back?
so what I can say is nothing profound happened,
Mhm.
nothing special. No great thing in the talk. He wove some different things together. I was like, well, that's a different way to look at it. And we laughed because he'd be funny, joking about himself. Tried to pronounce the word, I think, crocodile. He would say, but it's what he'd say, and the crocodile. And he would go on and like, Miguel, wait, what do you mean? He's telling some parable, say, like, well, and the crocodile. That word? And people are like, what are you talking? So then he's like, this is no, Miguel, it's pronounced crocodile. He's what I say. So funny, at times. But here it was, and he was telling stories of St. Francis of Assisi and the Buddha and Indian gods. And I was like, here's a guy taking these spiritual teaching. And he's like, here they are, they're all saying the same things.
Mm.
I'd gone to college, I had a comparative religions class. It's like, here's why they're all different.
Yes.
Right? If you study an academic way, he's saying, here's an essential message in all of them. They're saying the same thing,
Mm.
just different languaging and words. Here's the essential thing. It's like, well, that's nice. This makes sense.
Mm.
And about illusions, relationships, illusions in our mind. Okay, and how we like to have opinions, and they're addictive, and we get caught up in them in our stories, and but nothing profound, just like, oh, that brings some good things together. And I remember, but there was a piece that was walking to my car, about to get to my car, lovely tree-lined street in Old Sacramento, and it was like, I could learn a lot from him, which was a very strange thought for me to have. It came
What
from
was
some
that?
other part of my brain.
Yeah, okay.
because some other part of me was giving me that thought because I felt like I knew it all. I had a bunch of answers for everybody most of my life. You know, people should be doing things the way I thought they should be done. And I had so much ego and self-importance about my opinions that to think that I could learn from somebody was really a different kind of way of thinking. I was like, oh, okay, and just kind of let that sit because I think if I look back, it was probably just the way I felt walking out of there. Because I didn't know it at the time. But when he's teaching, he's filling the room with a lot of love and consciousness.
Yes, yes.
You know, so I'm picking stuff, energetic consciousness up, you know, that I don't know that I'm getting. And love and walking out feeling better than when I walked in.
Mm. Yes.
But not having picked up that that's what was happening during the 2 hour evening or so.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I make the distinction between our rational or thinking mind that wants to find the right answer, get the right information. This person is potentially going to give me the right answers. And then there's our wise mind connected to, our greater capacity to understand and to experience love. And
Yeah.
I know we've talked about before, I kept wondering, when are you going to give me the answer? He keeps talking about love and all this business. And I had the same feeling. I felt like I could learn from you. But at the time, I didn't realize what that was going to be. I thought one day you're going to give me the right answer, and I'm going to run with that.
I think
And finally, I've circled around.
you circled around to it's the love thing. Huh?
It's the love, which
Yeah.
you mentioned actually on the first day. And I'm like, oh, banging on about love again.
It's very elusive at a big
Answer.
level. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I remember, yeah, one of the journeys you saying, yeah, you know, it's like I always felt like you had this secret and, you know, hoping one day that you were going to share it. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I've been
Yes.
trying to give it away a lot. But the challenge is to move it from here to, you know, feel it in your whole body,
Mm,
you know, and feel that way about the people who've, you know, challenged us.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And I think, that really allows us to move away from that idea that if we do the right things, we'll get the right outcome. And, particularly focused on jobs and relationships and money and all those object related things.
yeah.
Moving away from that's where happiness is going to come from to, yeah, wisdom and love.
Yeah, and here's you say do the right things, which I think is very noble. Well, I'm going to parse that because it's like that sounds right.
Mm,
But then you have to like, what is this is where I get into what is right mean? And it's like, okay, let's
yeah.
do the inventory and the belief system and say, we'll do the right things. What are the right things? And now you start listing all the rules that you've acquired over your life that other people have given you, all the shoulds and supposed tos, and you're like, that becomes a very tight, rigid box you have to be that person that might leave you end up being exhausted. So there's this, yeah, the right things usually are what other people have taught us through punishment and reward. And it's like, no, that was not. Miguel had a completely different approach. he's like, no, you need to break out of the box.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was my first introduction to Miguel. Nothing impressive. Just some seed got planted. So I went back a month later, he was giving another talk, and I went again. And a month later, I was like, well, that was interesting, completely different way to look at things, you know. And it was the how we do drama in relationship. And I have an article on the website, and it's in my relationship course these kind of false images we create in relationships. He talked about this for like 2 hours. And I was like, yes, we do that. Didn't even know that we do that. We kind of live our life in relationships like that, and it's all false. And that's nonsense.
Mm.
And so, but a lesson that I had to come back to again multiple times because I still fell into that illusion and projected image and stuff. So anyway, so I don't know, I went to 3 or 4 talks like that. And it was like, each time it was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought of looking at it that way. And there were no books. There was no online course. There was no work. There's no nothing. There's no internet. His
Yeah.
4 Agreements book is not written yet. It's 1994. He says, and so I said, well, to figure out what this stuff really is, I need to go do it. I can't just have it intellectually in my head. I need to go do it to see if it's of any value. So I asked my friend, it's like, I'm going to do this work. What is it? I'm not committed to the path. I'm not like totally sold on Miguel. I'm learning about him. I've got, engineering level skepticism of anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But he said some things that make sense. I don't know how to put them into action. So I asked my friend who's studying, I said, well, what do you do? And they said, well, 3 things. Pay attention to your dreams. Remember your dreams, write them down. Information coming up. Meditate. And since you want to be happier, that means have more of, as far as what's the makeup of your emotional body, then it's some amount and mixture of fear with some amount of mixture in love makes up our emotional body, right?
Mm.
All the emotions that come from fear and greed and anger and jealousy, it's all fear-based emotions, and then love and gratitude and joy and laughter and peace, love-based emotions. I said, so go figure out what fears you have and get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all knowing how to do that, I go, okay. And so I was in between jobs. I hadn't found another job yet. Wasn't in a hurry to do so. And so I started, I was like, well, I'll go do this specifically on this road trip. I got 2 weeks or a couple of weeks. I don't know. I'm going to go through the Southwest. I'm going to visit some national parks. I'll do this. I'll meditate. I'll pay attention, remember my dreams, write them out. And then I'll find my fears and I'll get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see where that goes.
2 weeks.
It was a start. I didn't know. This is how little I knew or understood about the process. I didn't think I'd get rid of all my fears. Hey,
Yeah.
I thought I was in pretty big denial and ego. I didn't really know that I had any when I started until I started looking.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I went to your first retreat. I thought I was going to do it in 4 days.
okay, come here for 4 days, then I'll be all done and get it all in my.
Exactly. So how did that go for you? And I'm curious about, when did you start to see some growth or some transformation? What did you notice?
Okay, so that was 2 weeks with a clear, focused intent. Driving around the deserts in the Southwest somewhat, it's like open space for miles, no radio station. So I got to watch my mind.
Yeah.
And kind of had times to ruminate about what I wanted to do. And I noticed I had fear of doing it. It's like one of the things I would have. Well, one of the things is just, and this is the attention exercise in the course, was like, I'd be driving along for miles and I like noticed that my mind was all engulfed in some narrative about, I don't know, anything.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, how did I get here? Why is my mind thinking about, why am I thinking about that? And I was like, oh, that was a tangent of this. Oh, that was a tangent of that. And that was a tangent of that. And I could backtrack several tangents of like where my mind had just come to associated idea and jumped. I was like, well, that's wild. It's like this is things just jumping around from any association tangent. Right. And so I tried to track it back as long as I could. 3 hours later, I'm getting gas again. I go, why is my mind thinking about that? What was the last time I noticed what my mind was thinking about? It was like, it gone 3 hours. The last time I was really focusing, watching my mind
Mm,
was 3 hours before when I was backtracking the narrative tangents. I was like, okay, 3 hours went by. I didn't even know what I've been thinking about for 3 hours. So then it
mm,
began this like, I didn't notice this was progress, but I can look back at it later and go, all right, in those moments I had awareness of watching my mind, seeing how it was just taking me through story after story after story. And when I was in awareness, it wasn't taking me through narratives and leading me along through story. And so I didn't realize that was progress to be stepped out watching it,
yeah,
but that was progress.
absolutely.
I thought it was horrific to not be conscious for 2 hours and 56 minutes and to be conscious and aware for 4 minutes out of 3 hours or out of 4 hours, right? So 4 minutes out of 4 hours, it was like nearly nothing compared to the, 2 hours, 56 minutes. So I was like, this can't be good. Where am I going? My unconscious mind is telling me where to go, you know, 50, 59 minutes, 58 minutes out of the hour. Where am I going to end up if I only got control for 2 minutes out of a minute and a half out of an hour? Like, what?
Yeah,
This is not going to go well.
yeah,
So, so, I mean, that's somewhat how I was living in the narratives of my ex-relationship, right? Believing their story, living their narratives because I wasn't consciously choosing my own.
yes, yeah. And a couple of things that you just shared there really stood out to me. The first one is driving through for hours through the wheat fields.
In
And
the
I have my
desert.
similar experience of sitting in the forest, staring at the trees. And, I think that space and time allows us to step out of our everyday life,
Yeah.
step out of our roles and our patterns, and just be with ourselves and notice. Yeah, start to notice what does our mind do? What does our body do? What do we focus on? Like you say, you're able to focus for 1 minute out of an hour. And for that 1 minute, you start to connect with your observer perspective and probably for the first time notice it's there.
For the first time.
Mm.
For the first time.
And
And
then,
not realizing the significance of it. I mean, I saw it
yeah,
kind of an observer perspective a few minutes before, seeing my mind is making really bad decisions, and I saw it that way, saw it as a problem. But then just to see that it's doing this kind of stories, telling stories all day, it's dreaming and telling stories all day, and in training me into them, I was just like, and going, I don't want this. I don't know what to do about it, but I don't want this. I'm gonna have to try and be awake more.
mm. And as we move through these interviews, we're going to talk a little bit more about that observer perspective because it can seem like such a simple thing. And I think accessing that capacity is profound.
Yeah,
It gives us profound power over ourselves and over our life. It's a small thing,
it's a
but it's
superpower.
powerful.
It's a
Mm,
superpower. But I want to reaffirm what you said about taking the time. At that point, I was in between jobs and taking the time to notice, to shift my state because I'd gone through college and then I was in the Navy, busy. Okay. And here I had slowed things down and could just get off the treadmill.
Mm.
Because I had to figure out what I was doing in my life. I had to figure out how I ended up where I was, what the new direction was, how these things would work. But the key thing is like, I didn't want to do the same things that I'd done before. So I was looking, what was I doing that was habitual pattern? That would just be automatic the same way as like, I can't let that run. I didn't even know what it was that I was
Yeah.
looking for. I didn't know when I would find it, but I started to get clues. It was
Yeah.
like, I got to change the way this works, and I don't know how to do it. But I'm going to start doing the work and hope it
Yeah.
helps.
Absolutely. We can't change what we don't even know is there. Mm.
No, Miguel would say it begins with awareness.
Mm.
And one of the awareness for me was like, oh, that's what's good is not, what's there is not good. What's there is not good. So you have to be willing to be have that uncomfortable realization, like, oh yeah, I did that. Oh yeah, I say that way. Oh
Mm.
yeah, I act that way.
Yeah.
A lot of humbling
Were there any
realizations.
other were there any other moments that really or learnings that really stood out to you?
Yeah. So
Experiences?
yeah. So I'll tell you what happened on that trip through the desert. I was trying to figure out, started to do the work and hunt my fears. And because then that was one of the turning points. It was never, there was not a point where I was like, oh, I'm all in, Miguel's my teacher. Uh, I trust him completely. Like, no, I was like, well, let's try this out. Let's try this out. Let's try this out.
Mhm.
Let's and see where it goes. I'm always kind of very measured in skepticism, testing along the way, kind of from engineering training. Yeah, but I'm not putting all my trust and faith in that came further down the road, and that was a challenge by there was a couple of those things that were challenged by itself, but you can get to those when I was asked to apprentice with him, offered to apprentice with him, things like that. But on this journey, so I've been to a few Miguel talks. So I'm going to do the work, meditating without any instruction, making it up on my own,
Yeah, yeah.
trying to remember my dreams, writing down what I could remember, didn't remember much, and then hunting my fears, right? But I started to track my mind, and I start to notice narratives in my mind. And two, for instance, one was, here I am, I'm taking some time off, staying with my parents, get to catch up with them after really kind of being away for 10 years, college and the Navy. And I've had some time. I had a little money saved up, but I'm like, it won't last forever. And so, but I was like, here I am taking some time to enjoy in national parks and nature. And I'm like, when I'm out there, I would really love this. I
Mhm.
want to keep doing this. And then the voice would kick in and says, yeah, but you don't have an endless supply of money, you can't do it forever.
Mhm.
And what would your friends think? They think you're just a bum, you're not working, right? And it would go like that.
Mhm.
And so I would have these kind of joyful moments. This is what I want to go do. And it would be the mind would come in and try to contradict what was I was inspired to go do, of kind of take time and enjoy nature. After a while of that happening and being in Arches National Park or just beautiful places, it's like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm really enjoying this. I want to do more of this. Narration come in, kind of squash the enjoyment of it. Said, no, you can't keep doing this. You need to get back to work. What would
Yeah.
people say? And you're going to run out of money. Well, after a while, I noticed that rebuttal conversation repeat. And after a while, I started to know, oh my gosh, right near the end of the trip, I noticed there's a fear behind those two things. I
Mm.
heard the rebuttal, but I didn't notice the fear because I wasn't tuned in to hiding fear. I was brand new to it.
Yeah.
I would notice I had started to tune in. here's the inspiration, what I want. And here's the kibosh that put on it. And it was like, what is that that's saying that? And I could see, oh, fear, scarcity, not having enough, fear of what other people would say.
Mm.
Oh, fear of what would other people think of me and say, fear of not having enough. Oh, I started to finally see there was emotion to those narratives. You know? All right, so that went in my book. These are my fears. I don't know what I'm doing with it yet. Third one is I'm going along with this. Other thing I want to do, I want to take a spiritual path. No, what would people say?
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, oh, Kabasha. So it happened at that service level. But then I asked a deeper question, like, well, what would a spiritual path be?
Mm.
And my mind said, well, I had to immediately flashed a picture of me in a robe carrying a wood bowl around. That's all I had, all my possessions, right? And so my mind had constructed, this is what a spiritual path is.
Yes.
And yes, being home at the holidays, I would be the object of many jokes and ridicule. I could see that coming. And I'm like, cringe to like, because my family can be kind of ruthless with their humor around the table.
Mm.
And I was like, oh God, I can feel that bad. I'm like, okay, let me look a level deeper. If I'm taking a spiritual path and it's really working out for me, how would I feel? I was like, just be beautiful. This would feel beautiful. And if
Yeah.
I took that beauty and I was feeling that beauty and I went back to my family, I wouldn't care what anybody said. I could be feeling that. I was like,
Mm.
wait a minute. I don't care what people think about me. I care how I feel.
Mm.
I'm afraid and here's the fear. I'm supposed to be hunting my fear. Fear of what people think about me. That has to go. Fear of me taking a spiritual path. Fear of not working, having an extended break. Okay. Fear of money. Like, oh, I found 3 fears.
Yeah.
I was like, I was doing the homework. They have to go. I was reading a book, Care of the Soul by Thomas More, or just finished it, and talked about the power of ceremony
Mhm.
and how we use ceremony. Yeah, we use it in religious or spiritual processes, but we use it as a wedding. We use it at a funeral to help process death. Okay. We use it at birthdays as ceremony. We all come together, we share our love together. You know, we have cake together, we break food. Okay, there's power in ceremony. It's like, okay, well, so it's my last night. I'm in Zion National Park. I'm writing down these fears with as much detail as I can. And I know that they have to go. And I put them on some piece of paper. I was like, I'm going to do a ceremony tomorrow. I don't know what I'll do. I'm going to let him go in ceremony tomorrow in some ceremonial way. I'll bury him or I'll burn him or something like that. So I sleep in my tent. I have this commitment already done. I'm going to let these fears go. It's done. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. Some ceremony intentful thing. Meditate on it. That's what I'm going to do. Go to sleep. And then I'm in a dream.
Mm.
Not right away,
Mm.
you know. Only dream I remember on the trip. Going through this crowd of people, Miguel's in front of me talking to some girl I knew in grade school, and she's asking all these intellectual questions and stuff. And I'm like, and I'm trying to get around in the crowd of people because I got to go to the next thing, whatever the next thing is, right? And I'm like, you know, I remember saying, because she's all in her intellect, and
Mm.
Miguel's patiently answering a question, and I'm tired of this nonsense intellect. I say, it's, and I said something to the effect of, it's not what you think, it's how you feel.
Mm.
I think something in me knew that. I answered that like she's so high. Like, and get around him and go off to the next event. Uh, short version of the next part is very clearly in an auditorium, watching a woman put on this kind of one-person talk. And it's a very wonderful talk about relationships and love and how she's transforming her relationships and happier with everybody. And I notice that I can change the scene if I blink. Every time I blink my eyes, it kind of changes. So now I'm changing the dream. I hold my eyes open, it stays still. I blink my eyes, something changed, like she'll move into a different part of the scene, her clothes change, some appearance changes, right? I was like, well, what happens if I blink my eyes really fast? I start blinking my eyes very fast, changing the dream very fast. Things move so fast, everything turns to light. She's talking about relationships and how much love you can feel. And she's asking, what do you want your relationships to feel like? Whole place lights up. I light up in my heart. What do I want my relationships to feel like? How do I want to feel in all the time? It's filled with just my whole body coming from my heart, this beautiful love, overwhelming. Light comes down, show's over, she's done with her talk. I standing up in the dream, go, woo, yeah, it's fantastic, you know. And I look around me. And the guy on my left is looking at me like, and the guy on my right is looking at me like, and I'm like, I quickly realized they did not have the same experience I did. They're looking like it was a nice talk.
Yeah.
I feel this euphoria. And so I, you know, immediately I kind of blend in again. I sit down and I go, well, did I just make up what I saw? Who saw the real thing? And I was like, wait a minute, that's doubt coming in. This is happening in a dream. I have an awareness of like, am I going to believe in that experience I just have? That I'm full of, and I noticed I still feel this beautiful bliss coming from me. It's like, that's real for me, even if they didn't see it and feel it.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I decide, I'm going to believe in it, that it's possible, even if they don't.
Yes.
But it was a chance for doubt, right? Then I wake up in the morning in my tent. And now another chance for doubt. I'm like, it was just a dream. Oh, I'm waking up. Oh, and the other thought, oh, it was just a dream. And that thought diminished that feeling. And so I looked at that thought and go, yeah, but I still feel the feeling. And I'm awake with this body and I have the feeling. So I know it's possible here in the awake dream. And so there's chance of doubt from my own mind, doubt from other people. And it was like, okay, I'm going to believe that this feeling that I can have and this love I can have is possible. And I can feel this way, even if nobody else sees it, nobody else feels it. I'm on the chance that it's true and possible. I'm going to believe in it and then find out.
Beautiful.
And that's the first time I really felt different, and it was hugely different. You know, I had we call a power dream or a dream of power. I had a paradigm shifting experience in a dream. Woke up with the feeling and said, I'm going to believe this is real and that I can feel this way all the time, or at least part of the time, or more often in the world here.
Yeah.
And it's possible. Now I need to figure out how to do it.
Beautiful. I'm so glad to hear that story. I've never heard that before. And, you know, That's why I'm so happy to be having this chat with you today. There's just so much in that comes to mind for me. Firstly, you talk about being in nature, and Zion National Park, where we first met. I believe that nature has this incredible power to heal us. I grew up feeling like I didn't belong. And now when I'm in nature, I know I belong everywhere all the time. And so nature, I just think it has immense power. And you start to create this dream of what you want. And again, I think about the rational mind. It comes in with the, Gary, how are we doing that? How are we going to pay the bills? What are people going to think of you? It comes in with a very rational, logical, let's have a look at how this is going to happen.
But I want to say, not just rational, we have to also look, it's emotional. There's fear in there.
Absolutely. Yes.
Look at it, it's not just a rational mind, it's a fearful mind.
Yes. Yes. And I
there,
think
there can be rational loving, but my parts were at that point were rational fearful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about that rational mind as, it's often a gatekeeper for those emotions we don't want to feel. It says, Gary, I can make sure you don't feel that fear. You just need to work and get paid and behave.
Do what other people say, appease, be the person that they find acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah. But in your wisdom and in your heart, you have the dream. And so there's that pull of, yes, I can envisage this dream, I can feel this dream. And the rational mind is saying, but Gary, da 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 da. And so, we often have the pull of that. And I hear people dream, and they dream for a really short time, and then they quickly flip over to the rational thinking. How are we going to do that? And
here's the problems with that.
Yeah.
This is why it's not going to work.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so,
and this is fear and doubt.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Can we stay with the dream a little bit longer? I always say, hang about, let's stay with the dream. Let's feel that. Yes, the fears are going to come up. What are people going to think? The scarcity mindset, how am I going to fund that? It's going to come up. But let's stay with the dream a little longer. And what you mentioned about being able to change the dream.
Yes.
I think also we think, this is the dream I've had, or this is the thinking that I have. It's rational and logical. I need to stay with that. And I remember a practice that we did on day 1 or day 2 of the first retreat at Zion, where you got us to practice changing our dream. Imagine something, we were sitting under a big tree. Imagine the tree in your mind. Turn it upside down, let it turn into a pink marshmallow. And we did all of these things. And, for me, it was that first moment where I realized I had some capacity to have influence over what my mind was doing. And the rational mind says, but that's not real. But another part of me says, this is fantastic. I can do this. And does it matter if it's real or not? And
the thought that's not real. A thought's not real either. The thought that's saying that isn't real.
Yes. Yes.
It doesn't exist in any tangible way. So this thing that's dictating what's real and isn't real.
Yes. Yes. And one thought leads to misery and hopelessness, and one thought leads to empowerment and possibility and hopefulness.
Yeah.
So is it about which one's real, or is it about which one would I prefer? Which one works for me?
If they're both non-realities in your inner world, which inner world landscape do you want to live in?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fantastic.
So.
Yeah.
So there was a lot that happened there.
Yeah, 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 that's incredible. Incredible story. I wanted to ask you about your challenges or resistance along the way.
Well, let me add a couple pieces to that
Sure.
story. So, and then we'll come to challenges and resistances. So then the next day I have the ceremony. I have all these pieces of paper and I burn them. And then probably a day later I'm driving back home. A day or two later I'm driving back home. And I'm thinking, this has been fantastic. Love being out in nature. I'm going to do more of this. And I was waiting for that rebuttal to come.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, here's the same thought I had. Here's the inspiration. I want to be out in nature and spend more time doing this. And I knew the story. Right. So I had that inspirational thought, and then I'm waiting for the rebuttal to come in. And what I heard was, nothing.
Mm.
There wasn't a rebuttal because the fear wasn't there. And I thought that was quite amazing. I didn't realize it at the time, but later I realized that was a profound thing, that I changed the narrative story in my mind with that intent of the 2 weeks and the ceremony and the inspiration, the commitment. I was like, I'm not living by that fear. I'd written it down, I'd burned it, I had the inspiration to live with more love and less fear. And instead of that narrative thought, the chatter that was ongoing was now quiet.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, this is possible. Something happened. I don't know which all of this transpired to happen. I was like, that's possible.
Mm.
The mind got quiet where it used to chatter and narrate with fear. And I sat with that and I reflected on the trip and what had changed and my dream and the inspiration. And I knew that Miguel was having a power journey in a couple months. And I was like, I'm going to go on that. So that was a, about a 3 or 4 month, probably about a 4 month process of meeting Miguel, testing out the work, putting it into action, seeing a change. And I saw a number of little things, and then I had the heart opening experience as a big thing, but it was like, okay, let me take the next step. I'll go on a journey.
Yeah.
So that was my incremental, let me do the thing in front of me, of whatever I can sense is next, not knowing where the journey goes or what it all entails, but I'm like, let's do some more.
Yeah. Yeah. And a
Right.
couple of things stand out to me. One is you're not wearing robes with a bowl. I think as we go on this spiritual journey and we step away from our identity, perhaps, and what we've known before, it can be very scary. And we can have ideas of what this is going to look like for us. And I had my own idea of what that was going to look like for me. And I tried it on for a bit and I thought, you know what, Anna, this is just not authentic.
Yeah,
And
that goes further into the story of like, what do I have to, this part of deconstructing what my mind had presented, what a spiritual life was, and then I had to inventory all that. It's like, does it really have to be that? Like, no, it doesn't have to.
no,
It could be a
it can
thousand,
be
a
whatever
million
you want it
different
to be.
things. Okay. It's like I can have a regular day job, but inside I do my practices. So I mean, I have many of the friends that I studied with Miguel, they did very beautiful advanced work. And like some of them taught for a while and they're like, nah, I'd rather go do my day job.
Yeah,
They enjoy being graphic artists, taking care of their clients, but they're intensely, deeply spiritual people with normal
yeah,
day jobs.
fantastic. The other thing that stood out to me was you know, you use the word skepticism, staying skeptical. I use the word discerning, to be discerning. We don't have to follow someone blindly and believe everything that they tell us. You know, I always say to people, take what serves you and leave what doesn't. But I think there can be this idea that if you're following Gary and you're doing Gary's teaching, you have to believe everything that he says right from the get-go.
That's the paradigm people come in with.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to dispel that. You know, Miguel didn't ask for that. Miguel didn't ask for blind followers. He's and the course is called self-mastery. What I want to teach is self-mastery. I'm like, no, you're in charge of you. Here's as much as I can share that's helpful. Lessons learned, practices will help. It'll change these kind of things in your brain, your emotions. Go work with them and find out for yourself. And then go create your life the way you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And again, that lesson around abdication of power. I imagine you don't want people abdicating their power to you. They stay in charge of their process, healing, whatever it is that they're looking for. They stay in charge of that process, and you're offering teachings and practices and encouraging people to stay skeptical.
Yeah. You know, there's nothing that I feel I'm providing that says how you should live your life. Okay. What I'm providing, what I'm intending to provide is here's a practice to deconstruct the matrix of fear-based beliefs you have. Deconstruct the box where you feel limited and powerless and victimized and judgmental and angry. It's like, let's deconstruct the box of those narrative stories that's inside you. And then here's exercise to build a whole new inner landscape with love and compassion and gratitude and acceptance and peace in the world. It's like, I think go live in the world where you want. But, you know, here's the tools to change that whole inner landscape from the tight box and feel trapped to heart open love. So what you do with that, like, guys, I don't have anybody living with me that's following me. Okay. I'm not telling anybody, you know, come move by here and I'll tell you what to do. Like, no, that's an arrogant thing to do, to like think that I know better for someone's life than they do.
Mm.
And I gave that up, you know, a little whiles after I met Miguel. So I used to have that kind of thought. I'm like, no, he dispelled me of that kind of arrogance. So no, live your life.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's the way he taught me. He's like, Miguel didn't want followers. Miguel was teaching us to be masters of our own life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful. And so back to your challenges and resistance.
Well, that's what I was looking at when I was looking at fear. Yeah, that's what I was looking at when I was in the car ride, and I was like, no, go back to her. She was right, and you are unworthy, and nobody else will love you. You'd be happy to have somebody love you and take you back. You know, it's like that was right there telling me what to do. It was fear. Okay. Challenges with here's my fears about what I'm supposed to do with job and money and mind you, I still had to go manage my money and how much time I off and go back to work.
Yeah.
But this automatic program response of fear telling me I had to do it and when to do it and to feel bad that I wasn't doing it was like now was lifted, and it was easier then to like feel inspiration, like, okay, I can still make a choice and choose rationally, like, okay, I'm going to manage my money, my time, my spiritual path. But I'm not letting my mind tell me my spiritual path has to be done with a robe and a wooden bowl. Okay. So I was challenged. This was fear. Okay. You know, but that I was beginning to see the obstacles that were supposedly my advisors about how I should live my life. Fear was my advisor as opposed to my, I was now looking at it as like fear is my obstacle. Fear up until that point had been my advisor telling me how to live my life. And now I'm beginning to see it as an obstacle. And it was sneaky in the way it would come in. Oh, what would people think of you? As if it's like trying to help protect me from a bad outcome. Well, it
Yeah.
is, but it's putting me in a box. Like, no, don't take a spiritual path. Okay. No, you need to go to work right away and keep all that money in the bank and don't take any time off. As if it's like that's an advice that's trying to help me. And in a way it is, but it's like you're going to put me in a box to help me. And you keep me from living inspired and enjoying anything to help me. So fear was, and this is one of the lessons from Miguel over years, was he would call that the obstacles and progressions of a spiritual warrior. And the first obstacle is fear.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
spent all the next year hunting all my fears.
And, that resonates with me so much. I think in the beginning, to me, fear meant stop. Don't go further. Fear is telling you that's not for you. Whereas now, fear means more to me, listen. This is a growth point here. There's something here that is unfamiliar or I'm uncertain about, or not so much these days, but this doesn't fit with my constructed identity. Whereas now,
Here's something's uncomfortable. Let's take our time and work through it.
yes,
Pay attention. Okay, we're in new
absolutely.
territory. Yeah.
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 And it might be, instead of this being one step, it's 10 steps. I need to take it slower. I need to break it down into smaller pieces. Or I'm not resourced enough. I need some help here. I need some guidance. I need some love. Yeah. So it's not telling me stop. It's just saying, listen.
And this is fear that's really kind of awareness, discernment, more than no, don't, terrible things will happen. That could take you level 10 into freeze and panic. It's like, no, okay. I think having some fear is good. I've been in this. If I'm going to go do something I went hang gliding. And like my instructor, I had a bad move. I got too close to the mountain. I talked to my instructor about it. It was a couple of years ago, and he's like, "No, fear's a good thing." Yeah, if I'm flying too close to the mountain, yeah, be afraid of that. Move away. It's like fear is a great learning opportunity towards awareness. Now I don't need to be afraid of flying too close because I have the awareness that I'm not getting that close.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to be in fear because I've grown it into awareness. The same way we cross the street, we're not afraid of crossing the street, although we learn to be afraid of crossing the street. But if we grow it into awareness, like, oh, I can see the cars coming, I can see how far it is and how fast the cars are, and I can estimate how much time I have. It's like, okay, I have awareness to see that I have time or I don't have time. And I'm not afraid to cross the street due to awareness. We learn from fear, we grow into awareness. But if you stay in fear, not good living.
No, like you say, you end up in the box
Yeah.
where life is small and we just don't feel fulfilled there. We don't have that opportunity for growth and creativity. And we can start to believe I can't exist outside the box and need to be in the box to be safe.
So the obstacles and challenges. God, I went hunting my fears. I mean, they showed up, But those were the things that I was hunting. I mean, I was given the assignment, like, Gary, what are your fears? And go write them down and inventory and let them go, break them. And so the very things that were obstacles, I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
That was assignment one. And but these were the stories that would jump in my mind. So it's a couple months later, I go on the first power journey with Miguel. We're riding in the van. We're down in Mexico, and just getting to know these new people in the van and how long they've been studying with Miguel, what their intent was on the journey, which was sharing as we're headed off to the hotel. And these were just wonderful travelers, very intentful. I considered them like, okay, there's their high-level spiritual warriors, and their intent is very high. And I don't have any. I just decided to come, not knowing what would happen here. And I'm like, I'm way out of my league. I'm not qualified to be here with these people. Was kind of the thought. And, so it's like, I'll just be small and quiet. And, so that would show up.
At 6'3".
I'm not very good at being invisible. I can be quiet, but not invisible. So yeah, this immediately kind of self-doubt, the first, hour of the trip in the car, in the van. So, but then looking at like, what is that? What is that story? Who's my mind telling me I am? And why is my mind telling me this about myself? What part of my mind is telling me that? So I was hunting, it was telling me things about me, but had turned into this kind of like hunter watching it tell me and going, what's going on here? And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't have it figured out. I didn't see through the layers that I would see through later. But I was just like, what's happening here? So obstacles was fear, and fear was showing up all the time. But that's what I was looking for.
Yeah. And I love that process where, initially, especially when we're operating from unconscious, when there's a fear or an obstacle or a challenge, we naturally move away from it. We turn away from it and we move away from it. It's like, get away from that as quickly as possible. And what you're describing there is instead turning towards and saying, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Which to me is, a very different way of relating to fear and resistance.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Instead of it being your advisor that you listen to, obey, agree with, which would like our pattern is to do it unconsciously, automatically. Yeah, we're having it tell us where to go, what to do, what we should do, shouldn't do. If you look at the fear behind the narratives, the voices in our head, and you see what's the consequences of that. Yeah, you're challenging, and this is the spiritual warrior quality of we're in a fight for our freedom, and the freedom we want is from our fears and these false stories. And the spiritual warrior approach that Miguel taught us was challenging. Don't fold, but stand up, look at it, see it clearly. Don't bend, but don't attack it either. And then there's this sense of this warrior term, like attack it, like try and tear it down. It's like, no, there's this very elegant, peaceful, loving way that you can, as you gain more skills, you don't just question the story, but you can say, fear, hi, love you.
Yes.
No, thank you. Glad you were here for so many years helping me navigate the chaos in the world. And thank you so much. No longer need you today.
Yes.
What would you like to do instead? So what you do with it is, depends on your skill level and ability to hold your own space and presence at that point. But at that point, I could just hold my attention on it. And that I was very good with my skepticism to see kind of the narrative stories that were underneath and find like, well, here's an assumption within that that's not true. And try and help the thing fall apart by taking apart its assumptions. And that gets into why I teach the self-mastery course the way I do. I was like, you need these skills to dismantle stories.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of fears, challenges, obstacles.
Can I just, a few things come up for me as you describe that. One is
Yeah.
something, I often, when I'm working with people, um, if we're constantly just moving away from resistance, move away, move away, move away, move away, we're not headed anywhere. We're just headed away from. We're not headed towards a dream. We're not headed towards any outcome that we actually want. We're just moving away from reflexively. We're going nowhere.
Yeah. Our unconscious beliefs we're bending to them and living according to this some previously accepted program, somebody else's narrative story that we were given. Uh, and we're essentially kind of living in a past version of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because it's our past version of ourselves that learned to agree with that story from somebody else. You're not good enough, you can't do it, you'll never make it. Uh, nobody will love you the way I'll love you. You know,
Yeah,
like, yeah, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go be that person. Like
yeah.
lies. You're gonna, and then everybody's gonna change whether they try to stay the same or not.
Oh, yes.
You can't stay the
Yeah,
same.
yeah.
You can crawl deeper in a hole of fear, or you can crawl out.
Mhm. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Another thing that comes to mind for me is when I first started the self-mastery work, I was not in a good place and I didn't have connection to my power and strength. So initially, it was really helpful for me to get in that warrior energy, the straight back. I'm
Mm,
going into battle, I'm going to fight whatever's there. Um, yeah, with that intensity and power and a kind of a masculine approach.
yeah,
Yeah. Now,
yeah.
I
Physical
think it's
posture,
important.
energy.
Yeah. And I think I needed to do that. I needed to connect with that warrior energy, that power that I have within me that I didn't know was there. But now I'm a very soft and loving person. I'm very feminine. And so the approach that I bring to it now is acceptance and curiosity. I accept that you're there. I see you. I hear you. Can I get curious about you in a very loving way?
Yeah, to your
And
fears, to those dreams, those beliefs. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So no longer going at them or fighting with them
yeah,
or calling them
yeah,
liars, those sorts
yeah,
of things. It's like,
yeah.
let's sit a while.
But
Yeah,
I think
tell
you
me.
have that, you can do that. Well, partly because you're pretty much fearless at this point, but you're sourced, you felt that power, you know it's there.
Yes.
Okay, you've drawn on it so many times, you're like, oh, that's there if I need it, but just wait, we'll go at it this way, because this feels better to me, and I like doing it this way. So
Mm,
yeah, and I'm the same way. I can just be sweet and soft and loving, and like, yeah, it take as long as you like,
yeah.
so it's different. There are two stories I'm thinking back now about fear and doubt that I go to there. If you want to go there,
Yes. Yes.
it kind of jumps ahead in the timeline with Miguel. It was some months later, kind of an empowered journey or two, and then I was invited to apprentice with him. Miguel his business manager had sent out an invite and said, Miguel's taking apprentices again. He hasn't done it in several years. And because he came from this tradition in Mexico, and that's how we're taught. The master taught apprentices. It was a very closed group, private instruction. And I was invited. And my fear, alarm, cult story went on.
Yeah.
Like,
Ding, ding, ding.
well, let me think. And I was like, let me think about it. Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't know what the apprentice thing was. And there wasn't a lot of, wasn't an explanation, and there was no place to go to get an explanation. And it's like, are you in or not? It was kind of like, and I didn't even know what questions to ask.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
but thus far, and I think you get, I saw in the news the Jim Jones. So the mind and fear wants to go to the very worst case scenario. Okay, well, this means I'll eventually end up on a plantation in South America, and we'll be drinking Kool-Aid. Like, that's how this is going to end up. It's like amazing to watch that go that fast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I didn't know that Miguel was teaching us how to be masters of our own life yet. I didn't know that was essentially what he was teaching. I still thought it was something about, could turn dark at any time.
Yeah.
It's been great. It's been wonderful. The power journeys have been heart-opening and loving and fun. And we've had great times, and I have less and less fear and less worries about what people think of me. But, the mind could go like this anytime. So then, so after that fear settled down, I said yes. And then I go to, we have a weekend event. We're going to do a workshop, and we'll have the apprentice ceremony. And Miguel is doing this in a couple of different cities that he's regularly been teaching at. And then he explains, after we show up, he explains what the apprenticeship is. We brought all the objects that we needed for this. And he essentially explains, he says, my commitment is to you, is for your personal freedom, which is to get you out of the box of your fears and your beliefs, so you can live with your heart open with love. So my agreement is my commitment to you. This is your agreement in this apprenticeship is with yourself, to get yourself free for your personal freedom from these fears and false beliefs, so you can live with your heart open with love. And I'm like, well, that sounds like a very good deal. I owe him nothing. I don't owe him an allegiance or loyalty or anything like that. And I thought, this is a very generous man. He's not asking for any control or loyalty or commitment to him. And that was one of those of many moments of building trust with him. I'm like, this is different. What he's offering is something very different. What he's doing is something very different. It's not even transactional. I don't know what it is. I haven't seen it before, but it's generous. And yeah, I became an apprentice of Miguel. So,
beautiful.
and that went for a couple of years before that process ended. But the second real, so I didn't have a lot of reason to fear him, doubt him. I mean, let me go up and ask him a question, and he'd look you in the eye, and I wouldn't be able to look at him, and I'd be terribly uncomfortable if he looked at me, because I was like, and then I'd walk and go, well, what was that about, Gary? You're like, oh yeah, I'm afraid he's going to see into me and see how unworthy I am and how much I'm not doing the homework. And I was like, oh, okay. So all of these things that were judgments inside of me showed up. I was like, okay, well, let me try and look at him more honestly in the eye from now on. But it was like, I felt that all those things would be seen.
Mm.
I was like, but that was also like, oh, that's there.
Yeah.
Here's the beliefs about myself. Here's the box that he's inviting me to get out of. But by him being so present with me, I saw the box, the discomfort inside that I wouldn't have seen it otherwise.
Mm.
So being around him was both, fun and loving and heart opening. And you'd find these things inside that were like, oh my God, this is yucky. I
Mm.
don't love myself. I don't accept myself. I spend my life, trying to please and get approval from other people. And my efforts are to get respect and admiration from them. And so I do these things that I don't even like doing. I
Mm.
pretend to be a person I'm not, that would all show up.
Yeah.
So it was humbling to see it, and it was a relief to shed it. Because, well, yeah, I do that. Oh,
Mm.
yeah, that whole conversation I just had with Miguel, I was trying to impress him. I walk away and like, why did I behave that way? Why did I say that? And I'm like, oh, God, I wouldn't like what I saw.
Yeah.
But I was honest. It was like, what's the truth? Yeah, I did that. And then, okay, what inside me was trying to do that? It's like, it's
Yeah.
not, I wouldn't wish this work on anybody, but I wouldn't deny them the opportunity to go clean it up either.
Yeah. And
You have to
what,
really want to look there.
yeah. And what's coming to mind for me is there's pain in keeping the pattern that you were operating from before, please people, make sure you look good. And there's pain in noticing that's there and saying, I'm going to be honest about that being there. Maybe even I don't even know what to do with it right now, but
Yeah,
I can allow it to be there. There's pain in both of them.
there's pain in both of them.
Mm.
But one is temporary, that can be healed, and one you keep repeating over and over if you continue the behavior. And you're like, okay, but if I keep doing this, I'll feel that pain and pretend it's not there, but it'll be there forever. Or I can face it directly, the source of it, and go, okay, I don't know what's on the other side of this, but let's see what happens. And awareness. Oh, this is here. Awareness. First step, always first step. I don't know what to do about it. I'll start by sitting with it and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. And with one of them, you're going to head in the direction of nowhere.
Yeah.
And in the other one, you're potentially heading in the direction of where you want to go.
Yeah.
Mm.
So one more resistance story. Because over a lot of looking around this, I didn't have much resistance to the process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at this stage. Until I came to a big resistance. It was like, I mean, me finding resistance, which was fear, was the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then finding the beliefs under the fear, and finding the lies, and like then learning like, well, that's a lie. I'm not gonna, and then my faith would come out as soon as I could see it's not true. It's like, okay, so I was doing that, and that was going on for a good year. And then I would invariably like run into something that was just frustrating and like some mixed up bundle of agreements or emotional reaction about something. And it was like, because Miguel would meet about once a month. He'd come into town about once a month into town. It was an hour and a half away. I drove that hour and a half, 2 hours to go see him. Do a Thursday talk, do a weekend workshop, uh, with an apprentice meeting in there, and or after the workshop was over. And so, and then I'd feel euphoric and inspired, kind of ride that for a couple of weeks, and then run into some obstacle. Well, here's the next wall. Here's the next fear. Here's the next lie. Here's the next judgment I had, victimization story I was living. Like, okay, and then, wrestle with it for a week. Get close, like, well, Miguel's going to be in town again. Like, okay, I'd get some way through it, get to an obstacle with it. I didn't know what to do with it. Like, then go to the workshop with intent, like, okay, I got to break through this thing. Break through it in the weekend, workshop with him. So that went month after month. So get to a point, go one weekend to Miguel's. And Miguel's peculiar thing was around April again. It was around Easter, because Miguel was going to do a very powerful event the following week, 4-day event in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was in California. And he said, which I tried to go to, but I couldn't get all the days off. So, well, some other time. But I had this question for Miguel. It was like a week before. I said, Miguel, I have this feeling that I'm stepping off this cliff. And I'm stepping into this dark abyss. It's just nothingness. I don't fall, but it's nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and I'll do it in his voice. That's what I can. He's like, oh, it's because your belief system is almost completely broke. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, because I've never been in this situation where. So I asked him, is that good? He's like, oh, he's great. He's great because then you can recreate your own belief system, but the way you want to, not the way other people make you. From your domestication earlier in your life.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that sounds good. I create the belief system I want, and not this fear-based patterns and conditioning and box that I was given. Yeah. Great. Okay, good. Sounds like a good plan. I'll keep going. Go home. Message on my answer machine. Hey, Gary, going to the event this coming week in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You're going to be there. We'd love to see you. Two people left me a message. So I call them back. To go in, and I'm like, oh no, we can't go all 4 days either, but we're going for 3 of them. I'm like, oh, well, I can do that. I'll do that. Get off the phone with them. Book my flight to go out like a Friday morning early. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go see Miguel in New Mexico next weekend. Tell my brother, who I was living with, dude, I'm going to the Easter event. My life's out of control. It's great. Settle in for the afternoon. A couple hours later, I go, yeah, my life's out of control. Oh, a little while later, my life's out of control. A little while later, my life's out of control. Now it feels concerning. My life is out of control. And then the concern turned into worry. And it turned into fear. By the evening, I was afraid my life was out of control. I don't know where this is going. Don't know where this is heading. By the morning, I was in panic. And all the fear cult stories were like piling on. Where's this going? Where's this leading? Here, I just turn around. I come from one event. I go to the next one. Who's in charge? Who's making the decisions? What's happening? Where's this headed? Is this a cult? What's Miguel's end game? Who is he really? Is this going to have me go so far? I'm on a plantation, South America again, give him all my money. And then I thought, well, I don't really have that much money. Like, okay, but if I had some money, I'd give it to him. Like, he wouldn't want me because I don't have that much money. It's like,
yeah,
but it didn't make rational sense, but it was fear and panic. So the morning I'm in panicky fear. I think, well, I'll call my friends, get some input on this. But it's like, oh, I can call my friends that are apprentices with him.
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to give me the party line. They're the cult. Can't trust them.
Yes.
I can talk to my friend's family. They're not part of this Miguel thing, and tell them my concerns. Well, I can see their fear is going to go through the roof. They're going to tell me. They're going to tell me to run because it will be their fear talking.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, well, that's not really helpful advice on either side. Who do I trust? What I do?
Mm.
So I sit with it, panicky for it took about 3 days. And I got enough observer space from this fear of my life being out of control and losing control of my life that I was now, after about 3 days, I was observing it.
Mm.
Still panicky fear, but I was observing it. And I shifted the narrative and identity of the story that was like, oh, I could see it. It was like, fear is saying life is out of control. Fear is saying Gary's out of control. Fear is saying, I was like, and then it started to key in. It's like, oh, this is fear. This is my fear. And it's afraid of losing control of Gary. And this is a little pronoun shift, right? But we do this in the
Mm.
self-mastery course.
Yeah.
You have to be the observer of this story. What's telling the story? And it was the fear in my mind telling the story, I'm losing control of you. But it hides in the pronouns, right?
Mm.
And it was fear was losing control of Gary, and fear was afraid of losing control of Gary. Gary was getting out of control that fear had him under.
Yeah.
And I watched it that way, and it made more sense. And I sat in clarity, and I'm like, oof, because it wanted me to throw the whole thing away.
Mm.
But that wasn't enough, right? I still had to question, was it giving me something helpful? Sit with awareness, like, okay, is there some good bit of awareness? And so I was like, can I trust Miguel?
Mm.
It's like I gotta be I see it's fear talking, but let me be a skeptic and just not dismiss it. So is there
Yeah.
something valuable? It's like, can I trust Miguel? And I recapitulated or replayed all my experiences with him. And they'd all improved my life.
Mm.
I'm like, well, that's a pretty good track record. I got less and less fear of all of my training and teaching interaction. Okay. That's a good result so far. And nowhere has he tried to say, here, he told me what to do. Even if I'd gone and asked him, like, Miguel, should I do this? Should I do that? And he's like, well, what do you want? Like,
Yeah.
he wasn't going to let me abdicate my power to his opinion. He would ask me, well, but you thought about this? What's consideration? So it was like, he was always respectful. It was always my choice. I'm like, he's never tried to control me.
Mm.
And then I said, okay, when fears had control of my life and fears running me, what has been the result? It's like, ugh.
Mm.
And I very clearly decided, I don't know where Miguel's path is going, but the track record is very good. And I don't know where it's going, but I'll trust his track record and take what's next over what fear has offered me.
Yeah.
Okay, the results I've gotten from fear have been suffering.
Mm.
Okay. And I'm like, and it felt like something was going to die. The fear that had control of my life was going to die. And that was that step into the abyss.
Yeah.
This thing that had governed my life, that guided me, that was my advisor. Here it was after a year of hunting. It was like, what are you going to do without me? It was afraid of dying
Mm.
because if I didn't feed it, if I didn't give it any more faith and power, then it would have nothing to go on, no energy to go on because I wasn't enabling it anymore.
Yeah.
And so I had this terrible fear of losing control of my life. But I didn't want fear to have control of my life. And I didn't know
Mm.
what it would be without it, but I was like, I don't know what it's going to be, but that's okay. I don't want it to be what I can't keep living the same way I've been living. I'll take the unknown. So this is the leap of faith. I have to take this step into navigating life without fear.
Mm.
And I don't know what that's like. But let's do that unknown. And so I remember driving to the airport. So I had a couple days before, between like Wednesday, really having this clarity of being the observer of the fear and recapitulating history with Miguel and fear, and kind of like, and it was like, this was like a death, a fear death, fear in my mind. And driving to the airport on that Friday morning, like playing music that was like a funeral. Like, I'm going to a funeral, I'm going to a death. It's a very beautiful death. It's a very beautiful ending. And I don't know what's next. And I accept that.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a case where that fear and the resistance obstacle, I didn't have it a lot about the process, but boy, when it came big, and it kind of threw everything at me at once. There were many other hiccups and potholes and challenges along the way, but this was a big one. This was like my ego fear was like trying to play all its cards at once for its survival.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a powerful story. And, I think there are so many nuggets in there. Um, something that stands out for me is I'm wondering about all of the changes and progress you'd made along the way up to that point. You still were able to operate within the realms of your constructed identity of Gary. This is still Gary as I know him. And, was that the point where you stepped just right out of that constructed identity into just a completely unknown space, an unknown version of you, where you have, you describe trust.
It didn't happen in that process, separating from the fear, but I had made the commitment to step into a new identity that didn't live and think and make decisions based on that fear. Because I had gotten rid of a lot of fears, but like down here was this underlying one of like still kind of maneuvering me around. I was like, and so I made the commitment to make that leap to like, I'm going to live without that. I don't know who I'll be without it. I didn't really think of it in terms of shifting identity at the time. I just know like this has to go. I don't know what will happen, but this has to go, which is like always a leap of faith. It was, which is how I've done so much of my journey. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen here, but this has to go. And I don't know what's next, but I'll embrace it. So the change did not happen in my process for that, but I set it up, had the intent. I went to the weekend, and it was a great weekend.
Yes.
Lots of change happened, and that shift happened.
Mm. You described a trust in Don Miguel.
Yeah.
But I'm also sensing there was a trust in yourself. You had been discerning. You had been making changes and working past resistance. What was the trust in yourself at that point?
That's a very good question. I don't think I've thought about it that way.
I'll share a personal story, and some of this already. But I grew up, my story was I'm the weird one. I came from a family where other kids weren't allowed to play at our house. We were the weird family, and I was the weird one. And, that was my fear story. Don't let people know you're the weird one. I'm also an introvert. And so for me, now I do public speaking and groups and so forth, which is outside the realm of my constructed identity as someone who needs to hide and be quiet. And so, I have two kinds of trust, probably three. One is that I trust the audience that I'm speaking to, that they want the best for me. This interview today, I know you want the best for me. And I imagine the audience listening, I imagine they want the best for me. And again, I'm constructing a story that works for me. So,
You can
I
create
can
your inner world any way you want. So create that one. Yes, good.
create that one. Exactly. So I trust other people. I also trust myself. I am discerning. I know that I can show up and I'll work out anything that I need to work out and that I can do this. And so there's those two levels of trust there. And I also trust in the universe and my belonging in the universe. I belong here. And my best version is to just show up authentically, and that will be whatever it is. And that will be enough. And
You belong in the universe. You're here. So show up. You belong here. That's enough.
yes,
Beautiful.
yes. And so I construct those stories. But that is so far outside of my previous identity and the fears that kept me stuck in that identity. There was a period of time where I could not leave the house because I literally did not want to be seen and heard. And so I'm able to step out of that. Do fears still come up? Yes. But because of those different levels of trust that I have, it doesn't keep me contained in the box. I can step out of it. And I don't have a box there anymore. I'm able to step away from that fear and say, let's do this anyway.
I think about your question, trust in myself, and what was that like? And I don't. One thing comes to mind about that process that took several days, this fear, is what I said, like, well, if this does turn into a cult, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can leave anytime. Because I
Exactly.
commit and I go to this event,
Mm,
doesn't mean I have to do the next one or anything else,
absolutely.
you know? So my agreement and commitment was to go do this event. And I wanted to go just because I didn't want the fear deciding for me
Yeah.
my choice. I was like,
Mm,
oh, hi, fear. I'm in rebellion to you. I'm going to defy you just to break this habit of you having control over my life and affecting me. It's like, this is like, I'm breaking my agreement to have you control my life. I'm going to the event that you don't want me to go to. And after that, we'll figure it out.
yeah.
So, so I could have more trust because I wasn't committing to something giant.
Mm,
I was like, I'm going to do this part. This is what I'm comfortable betting. I'll bet this big. I'll bet one weekend and one event and one fear, and then I'll see how things settle out and I'll do the next thing. So, and this is part of my skepticism,
yes.
right? And
Yes.
I'm no long range visionary for the most part, particularly my process. I could see what was in front of me, and I'm like, I got to do something with this because I don't want to stay here.
Yeah.
All right. So it wasn't matter like I had great faith in me or what would be in the future. It was like, I can't stand living this way anymore. It's like, oh, I'm judgmental of so many people. You know, like, this is horrific. I don't want to live with that going on in my head. I got to do something like this, got to go. So, whatever it was along the way. Um,
Yeah.
so I think I I had faith that I could figure it out, the step in front of me, and then I'd work on the next thing later.
Yeah. And I think that's
Uh,
so powerful when we say, I can take the next step. I don't have to have everything worked out past that. I just, I can take the next step I can be discerning, I can leave anytime I want to. Whereas the fear says you're going to be stuck in this and there's no way out.
The fear exaggerates, it wanted to make it had me going off to South America and giving them all my money and ending my life. I'm like, I would have to make a lot of decisions for that to happen, none of which I want to make.
Yeah.
But fear would say that would happen. I'm like, well, no, this is like, I'm not giving my power to fear, and I don't have to, or to Miguel or any other teacher, like how to live my life. Miguel is teaching me that. I'm like, so this thing that fear is saying would happen, like, no, I'd have to agree to all those things, and I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and the other thing that occurs to me in your question was, over the course of my life, I had invested a lot of my faith and trust in fear as my advisor, and these false beliefs and what I was supposed to do and what would make me acceptable to people, and the kind of person I'm supposed to be, what a spiritual person was too, right? What a spiritual path was like. I had invested faith in that, didn't even know it. And so when I found it and said, no, that's not a spiritual path, doesn't have to look like that, I was getting my faith back from these stories, from these ideas, from these fears, from this ego self-importance, from my critical voice of the judge. That's like, no, I don't want to put my faith in what you have to say, or this unworthiness of what that has to say, or what my ex called me or made me believe. I took my faith out of those stories. So I was recovering my faith that first year. I don't know that I had it in myself. I knew what I had to do. I had to get my faith, my power back, faith, power back from all these stories and all these fears. And I was like, that's what I was committed to do. I didn't know what would next. I didn't know how it would change me. I didn't know who I was. And I couldn't see who I was or what I could be until I had my faith and power back from these false stories. So my journey was get my power back, get my faith back from these false stories and fears. And I don't know that I really was invested in my identity or trusting myself to do it. I just was like a spiritual warrior. I'm like, this is what I got to go do, because I want to be happy no matter what, which means I need to decide what goes on in my inner landscape instead of these fear stories. And I want less fear and more love. The fear stories have to go. Then there'll be room for more love, and we'll do what's next. I was still on that simple first assignment for the whole year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I took a little assignment and I just went deep with it. Tried to do it as completely as I could.
Yeah. And I think, that speaks to me so much. I feel like I'm still doing that years and years later, noticing the fears when they show up, and yeah, turning towards listening and not letting them keep you there, allowing yourself to continue towards your dream, whatever that is. And I always think you can dream whatever you want to, it can be whatever you want it to be.
And I think back now, it says, if that's all I'd done, if that's all I've been able to accomplish, was to, like, in my whole life, was dissolve my fears and get my power back, my faith back from those stories and those fears. That's a good life.
Yeah, it certainly is. I've got one last question for you today.
For today, okay.
I described you at the beginning of this interview as a spiritual teacher. And so I'm curious about what spirituality means for you, and how do you experience it on a daily basis?
Spirit is life. Okay, well, we could do a whole session of this, but I'll just give you something. Not to avoid too deeply. Okay, spirit is life. Everything is spiritual. Right? It's all life. The construct that I learned was this duality that and I lived for this in this kind of lie. This is a whole nother evolution of the journey, was to see this, the construct I learned was like, oh, the spiritual is the loving, accepting, compassionate, forgiving part. And the non-spiritual is like the day-to-day material matter and the fear and the lies. It's like, that's not great. Well, it's actually all spiritual. It's all part of creation. It's all of it's here, and none of it by accident. It's all by creation.
Yeah.
I mean, in a simple version is all my fears and lies and beliefs I grew up with. Oh my God, that made for an amazing journey of awakening to then feel what love was like. Couldn't have done it without that.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's many ways to phrase it, but how do I live it now? Is everything beautiful? And that's because I see it without this duality of, oh, this is spiritual and this isn't.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I don't put it in those two boxes. And I see it's all creation bubbled up. And when we take away the narratives that separate them, oh, this is good and this is bad, and I was, then everything's beautiful. That came about sometime later in my journey with Miguel, when I was just came into realization of my self-importance and what a ego and story to story I was living in. And I sat with Miguel and said, son of a gun, he saw it the whole time. And he loved me the whole time. And it was like, I could tell he loved me the whole time. And he saw that I was living by so much of that self-importance and ego. And it's like, oh, because he didn't categorize that as bad and reject it. And I was like, that's just who I was, what I was growing through and the journey I was on. And I had the experience of kind of like extending my consciousness in his point of view and seeing he didn't have this ideal of who I should be and compare me against it. And I was like, I was trying to be this ideal spiritual person with no mistakes, no flaws, and it's like, if I do that, then I'm good enough. And like trying to be that for his approval, right? And I'm like, oh my God, that's the game I've been playing, not realizing it.
Yeah.
And he's like, no false version. He had no false version of what I should be. He saw me all that I was, light and dark.
Yeah.
Loved all of it. And I saw he loved everything about me. I was like, that was a completely different way to love. It was like to know all your flaws are seen. Idiotic behaviors are seen. And that you're loved and accepted. Something transformative happens in that.
Oh, absolutely.
And I was like, oh my God, I want to look at myself the way Miguel does. I want to see and love everything about me, even the ego parts.
Yeah.
That's how I want to look at myself. And I said, you know what? And then let me even better. Well, what can make that better? I want to look at everybody else in the world and just love them the way they are. And this became the next part of my journey. It's like anytime became later in the process, like, oh, any kind of image of who they think they should be that I could compare them to, and then finding less than an image that I made up in my mind or that my mind made up and told me they should be. I'm like, that had to go. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to love them the way they are no matter what. I'm like, that's so much less effort and more enjoyable. Yes. So, the destruction, the duality, the letting go of the narrative stories, the constructs of where a mind projects things, the illusions are spiritual, but they're also illusions. I mean, it's all part of life.
Yeah.
And the waking up we can do from it as part of life if you want to. So I look around and I'm in awe. The way I see everything manifesting into creation, you know, to look at the trees that are making us oxygen, and they're growing out of the ground from nothing, and the ground came from nothing, and it all came out of this spinning world of a black big bang from nothingness. And it's here in the midst of a universe that's still expanding, which means it's still exciting, which means the explosion's still happening.
Yeah.
And we get this glimpse in time of where we are now, to be at stable, to take a breath and perceive how amazing it is that it's here at all.
Mm-hmm.
I spend a lot of the day breathing and enjoying breathing. I'm like, that's really cool to have like the pleasure of breathing and the beauty around me, and to just see as much beauty in a state of awe that it's here without any narrative stories comparing it to some imaginary version that would kind of wouldn't feel as good.
Mm.
My narrative story projecting how it should be is not as good as how it really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
For creation or anybody.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
so that's a glimpse of like, you know.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense to me what I know about you. And I really love spirit as life. You're just a life teacher, help make chaos more
life
simple.
life coach.
Mm. Um, because what I know about trauma and my own experience of trauma, and something that you speak to, you refer to Don Miguel speaking to, is the fog that keeps us separate. I certainly felt that fog, the fog that kept me separate from life. Not only could I not feel life, I couldn't even see it. And when that fog is gone, we can see life, we can feel life, and it's magical. It's filled with awe just looking at it. I spend a lot of my time in nature these days. I've been spending a lot of time looking at birds. And it's just fascinating and beautiful and complex and messy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
life is messy. It's very
Mm,
messy. And
beautiful.
that's okay. If we don't
Yeah.
judge it, it's beautiful,
Yeah.
you know? Um, so
Mm, beautiful. And as my life teacher, um, yeah, you've just been so pivotal in helping me to lift the fog. And, my circumstances are exactly the same. Nothing has changed. Um,
on the external part,
yeah,
yeah, your
absolutely.
external life still the same,
Exactly the
similar,
same.
yeah,
Yeah,
not much
yeah,
change. Internally, you live very differently.
yeah. I can see life and I can feel it, and it's beautiful. So thank
Yeah,
you. Mm,
you're welcome. Thank you for receiving my message.
mm. And so we might leave it there today. Thank you for sharing so openly and so candidly um, your story. And, there is so much wisdom in those stories. I think there's just so much in them. They
There's
sound
a
like
lot.
simple
Yeah,
stories. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I think
but they're really powerful. And I think they're stories that will resonate with a lot of people.
I hope it
Mm.
helps.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So much a pleasure talking with you, for your questions, your time and attention. It's always wonderful to chat with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is going to be the first interview in a number of interviews. So we'll have some more to talk about next time.
Thanks.
Lovely. So we'll just leave it there.
Leave it there.
Yeah, beautiful.